Hello Pokemon and Harry Potter fans, here's the last set of characters, enjoy. Next up is Draco Malfoy's father, Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy chose the Pokemon Serperior. Serperior can stop its opponent's movements with just a glare. Lucius Malfoy also had a cold stare that people like to avoid. Also, Lucius definitely had a Serperior air about him, as if he just knew he was better than everyone else. All the time. Serperior is also a snake, and Lucius really respects snakes. He even carries a magical staff that's shaped like a snake. Not to mention he's always been a proud Slytherin, as we know from a flashback of him congratulating a young and bittersweet Snape as he too was placed in Slytherin House way back when. Next up is Narcissa Malfoy, whose Pokemon is Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan is a nurturing Pokemon that protects its young at all costs. Narcissa is a nurturing mother that protects her son Draco at all costs, even if it meant going behind Voldemort's back against her sister's wishes. When Draco was given his big mission by Voldemort, Draco gave his mother Kangaskhanite to symbolize that he wasn't a baby anymore, but Narcissa responded by saying that even though the baby Kangaskhan leaves his mother's pouch, doesn't mean that the mother Kangaskhan won't still protect him. The last move Kangaskhan learns is Reversal, which is interesting because in the last chapters of the last book, Narcissa certainly went through a reversal of her own when she basically switched her allegiance to Harry Potter in the last-ditch effort to try to save her son Draco. Next up is Voldemort's best last lieutenant, Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix caught Miss Magus at a young age and it taught her how to deal with the misery that the Dementors would later try and inflict on her once she got sent to Azkaban. Miss Magus can use advanced incantations for various purposes such as causing misery, and Bellatrix liked her style because she too liked to use torture spells. The last move Miss Magus learns is Astonish, and that describes the look on Sirius's face after she'd killed him, and the look on her face after she was killed by Molly Weasley of all people. Astonished indeed. If Miss Magus is defeated, the victims under her control will be released just as the people who were Imperious were released after Bellatrix and Voldemort were defeated in the Battle of Hogwarts. Next up we have You-Know-Who. It all gets so confusing if we keep saying You-Know-Who. I've never seen any reason to be afraid of saying his name. Voldemort, or as I like to call him, Tom. Voldemort's Pokemon is Act 1 Mewtwo, or human-hating Mewtwo. Voldemort liked Mewtwo because they were so similar. Mewtwo was a creation of science, and Voldemort was a creation of dark magic. Mewtwo was created after years of horrific gene splicing experiments that made it vicious and extremely powerful. Voldemort was created after years of horrific soul splicing experiments that made him vicious and extremely powerful. Mewtwo was capable of levitation, telepathy, and mind control. Voldemort also knew how to fly, read minds with Legilimency, and control minds with the Imperious Curse. Both ended up being gray humanoid creatures that weren't quite human. Just as Mewtwo is said to have the most savage heart among all Pokemon, Voldemort seems to have the most savage heart among wizards and witches. They both lack compassion and strike fear into their enemies with cold, glowing eyes. Both spent a significant amount of time in a cave. Both were created using genetic material of a parent. Next up is the friend who betrayed Harry Potter's parents, Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew chose Raticate, and like him, Raticate is one surprisingly violent rodent. Next up is the headmistress of Beauxbaton Academy, Madame Maxime. Madame Maxime's Pokemon is Grumpig. Like Madame Maxime, Grumpig is an excellent dancer that dons pearls and has amazing powers. It's also known to live in the mountains where the giants are known to live. Not that she's part giant or anything. Of course I'm not saying that, how dare you even think that. Next up we have the headmaster of Durmstrang, Igor Karkaroff, and his Pokemon Honchkrow. Honchkrow is known as the big boss Pokemon, and Karkaroff is known as the big boss of Durmstrang. Honchkrow and Karkaroff are both known to be ruthless, and they make their underlings do all the work. For instance, Karkaroff never helped his students row the boat to Hogwarts. Though Honchkrow is known as the summoner of the night, Karkaroff fled when his summoner called him that one night. According to the Dex, crows, which Honchkrow is based off of, get revenge on people who cross other crows, never forgetting their face. Well, the Death Eaters got revenge on Karkaroff after he crossed his fellow Death Eaters, and even though he ran, they never forgot this and eventually found him. Next up is Bodycrouch Sr. Bodycrouch's Pokemon, Ninetales, is said to have wizard ancestry. Ninetales is known to be able to understand human speech, and Crouch was known to be able to understand lots of different languages, being the head of the Office of Magical Cooperation. Like Crouch himself, Ninetales is very smart, very vengeful, and very vindictive. Ninetales is a pure fire type, and Bodycrouch's strategy for fighting Death Eaters was fighting fire with fire. The bad guys were killing, so he authorized his good guys to kill as well. Ninetales has also been known to severely curse those who mistreat it, and Bartycrouch was the only one to authorize the use of the unforgivable curses against suspected enemies. Ninetales is also known to be able to gain control over people's minds, and one of the unforgivable curses, the Imperious Curse, allows one to do the same. He himself used it on his son, and he even meddled with the mind of one of his fellow employees, Bertha Jorkins. He also imprisoned his son at a young age, and was eventually imprisoned by his son. And listen to this, the last move Ninetales learns is called Imprison. Next up we have former Quidditch superstar and suspected Death Eater, Ludo Bagman. Once Ludo retired from Quidditch, he caught a Meowth after hearing about its unique ability to produce coins using the move Payday. For a serial gambler such as Ludo Bagman and someone who might have been in need of some extra coins, this was a match made in heaven. Like Ludo Bagman, Meowth is playful and has the capacity for human-like intelligence. Next up is Fudge's successor as Minister of Magic, Rufus Scrimgeour. Rufus Scrimgeour caught the Pokemon Zangoose. People appreciate Zangoose and Rufus Scrimgeour's apparent toughness and serious demeanor. Zangoose is bitter enemies with Seviper, a Snake-esque Pokemon. It's been battling Seviper for many generations and it has the scars to prove it. Rufus Scrimgeour is bitter enemies with the Death Eaters, who are evil humans with snakes on their forearms, and he's battled them for many generations as an Auror and has the scars to prove it. Next up is Kingsley Shacklebolt, the skilled Ministry of Magic wizard who was secretly an Order of the Phoenix member. Not only did Kingsley believe Dumbledore when he said that Voldemort was back, but he sort of felt that something on that level was definitely going to happen thanks to his Pokemon Absol. And everyone remembers that dark moment when after Bill and Flora's wedding, Kingsley sent his Patronus to warn them all of the impending disaster that was soon headed their way. That's Absol, the Harbinger of Doom, the Pokemon with the ability to predict disasters. As Minister for Magic post-Voldemort's defeat, he'd focus more on prevention of the potential disasters, and his Absol would be right at his side helping him. Next up is the sketchiest member of the Order of the Phoenix, the thief, Mundungus Fletcher. Mundungus got his Pokemon Murkrow in a trade, and he says it's one of the best deals he'd ever made, sort of a gift that keeps on giving situation. Murkrow has a fondness for anything sparkly, and it will steal things such as jewelry and bring it back to his nest. Mundungus does the same thing, proof being that he nicked several things such as jewelry from Sirius Black's home after he died. When Murkrow and Mundungus are chased, they try to lose their pursuers. It's possible to train a Murkrow to repeat words. Well, Snape trained Mundungus to repeat his words to the Order of the Phoenix. Murkrow is generally loathed by many, and so is Mundungus. Next up is the greatest wand maker in Europe, Mr. Ollivander. His Pokemon is none other than Delphox. Delphox is a witch/wizard type Pokemon that carries a stick that it uses like a magic wand. It's easy to understand why Ollivander would find this Pokemon appealing. In fact, his Delphox might be the most powerful Delphox in the world, as Ollivander would be able to make and test out different wands for Delphox, eventually unlocking Delphox's full power. Next up is barmaid at the Hog's Head, Madame Rosmerta and her Miltank. Like Madame Rosmerta, Miltank offers up a drink that is sweet and that can be used to heal the ill or the weary. Got butterbeer? Got fire whiskey? Got milk? Next up is the barman of the Hog's Head and Dumbledore's brother, Aberforth Dumbledore. Go-Goat is clearly a goat, and Aberforth loved goats. His Patronus is even a goat. Go-Goat has the ability to sense the feelings of whoever grips his horns, which is great because Aberforth keeps a lot of his feelings inside. But he didn't always used to do this. He used to lock horns with his brother and Grindelwald when they were teenagers in order to show which of them were in charge. This ended badly, but even in the wild, Go-Goat choose their leader by locking horns. Next up is Albus and Aberforth's little sister, Ariana Dumbledore. Ariana's father caught her a Meowstic at a young age. Ariana and Meowstic both struggled to keep their otherwise uncontrollable power in check, but they tended to release their power on occasions when they were threatened. One day some Muggle boys came and stole her Pokeball containing Meowstic, and her father got sent to Azkaban for going over the top while trying to get his daughter's Meowstic back. He wasn't able to get it back, and Ariana was never quite the same. She began to lose control more often. Next up is the brilliant, yet power-hungry and evil Gellert Grindelwald. Gellert Grindelwald was able to amass a lot of power using his Aegislash. And Aegislash is said to be able to detect the innate qualities of leadership. This is why Grindelwald found this Pokemon appealing in an Elder Wand type of way. Like the Elder Wand, Aegislash could be used to manipulate others. Aegislash has been used by generations of kings, just like the Elder Wand has been used by generations of powerful wizards, such as Grindelwald, Albus Dumbledore, and Harry Potter. Legend has it that whoever Aegislash recognizes as his worthy leader is destined to become king, and that's the story of the Elder Wand as well. In the end, the Elder Wand recognized Harry Potter as his master, and because of this, Harry Potter was able to defeat Lord Voldemort. Grindelwald was able to sweep and defend against all that stood in his way until eventually, Dumbledore had to step in with his Ho-Oh to defeat his old friend Grindelwald and his Aegislash. Next up is Horcrux Tom Riddle, or the spirit that Tom Riddle left in Riddle's diary. Horcrux Tom Riddle chose the Pokemon Spiritomb. Both Horcrux Tom Riddle and Spiritomb lack a physical body. They both exist in their current forms after their spirits were sealed into objects using a mysterious spell after a series of misdeeds. Spiritomb and Horcrux can still be just as evil as the souls sealed within. Also, information about creating Horcruxes was forbidden at Hogwarts, and Spiritomb is known as the Forbidden Pokemon. Next up is Voldemort's terrible uncle. He chose the Pokemon Ekans. Ekans will lash out with a bite when frightened by anything it sees as a threat, just as Morphin lashed out at Bob Ogden when he came to the house. Next up is Voldemort's broken down mother, Merope Gaunt. After years of abuse, she was able to catch a FEEBAS. When her family found out that she chose a Pokemon that wasn't a snake, they forbid her from raising it. In fact, her father Marvolo actually released it as a punishment. This is a tragedy because had he been more patient with FEEBAS, it would have turned into the most beautiful and happy snake, melodic, and Marvolo loved snakes. But of course, he was not patient, just as he was not patient with Merope, so she was never able to become the beautiful and happy person she could have become had she been raised elsewhere by different people. After he got rid of her FEEBAS, Merope was distraught as she had heard that it would have eventually turned into something wonderful. Neither FEEBAS nor Merope were very smart, and due to FEEBAS' poor appearance, it was largely ignored by trainers. Just like due to Merope's poor appearance, she was largely ignored by the guy she was in love with. She was eventually able to trick the guy into impregnating her, but he left her after he found out what she'd done. She died shortly after giving birth to her son, and one of the last things she said was that she hoped that her son Tom Riddle would get his father's looks and not her own. Next up is Voldemort's grandpa, Merope's father, and Slytherin enthusiast, Marvolo Gaunt. Marvolo loved snakes because he was so proud of his Slytherin lineage. He chose what he believed to be the best snake Pokemon he could find. He chose ARBOK. Marvolo and ARBOK are both rather vicious, intimidating, vengeful, and territorial. They both lash out at intruders. To intimidate foes, ARBOK shows off its chest and makes eerie sounds by expelling air from its mouth. Brings to mind Marvolo proudly showing off his Slytherin's ring while speaking in Parseltongue. ARBOK caused weak foes to flee just as Marvolo sent his weak daughter Merope fleeing across the room and Bob Ogden running down the hill away from his house. ARBOK may also have been inspired by the legendary Basilisk due to its paralyzing glare, which makes sense because Marvolo was definitely inspired by the famous owner of the Basilisk, Salazar Slytherin. Next up is the infamous Fenrir GRYFFINDOR'S, who was a werewolf that was just as terrible in human form. He chose a Pokemon with whom he could share a kinship, and that turned out to be SNEASEL. SNEASEL and Fenrir GRYFFINDOR'S are notoriously vicious and use their claws to do substantial damage. They usually work in groups, whether it's a group of SNEASELs or a group such as the Death Eaters, the Werewolves, or the Snatchers. They hide in darkness waiting to attack their prey, and the younger the better. Next up is one of Voldemort's most loyal Death Eaters and the professional Mad-Eye Moody impersonator, Barty Crouch Jr., who chose the Pokemon Zorua. Zorua and Barty Crouch Jr. both changed their physical appearance, and at some point both appeared to be nothing but a quiet little boy. Both kept their true forms hidden to ensure their safety, and both ended up being mischievous tricksters who like to surprise others. They both also know a thing or two about spite. At a certain point, they both take on the appearance of their enemies. In Barty Crouch Jr.'s case, that meant transforming into the best aura there ever was, Mad-Eye Moody, the legendary dark wizard catcher. Next up, we have the Death Eater duo ALECTO and Amicus Carrow, who were allowed to teach at Hogwarts after Dumbledore was killed. ALECTO Carrow, the woman, chose the Pokemon DUSKULL, which dons a black robe and a mask that resembles a skull just like most Death Eaters. Her Duskull was quite pleased with her, as Duskull loves when children cry, and because she and her brother tortured children so much, there was a lot of crying going on. Her brother Amicus had a Houndoom and taught Crab how to use a move similar to Houndoom's terrible fire attack, Fiend Fire. Both Duskull and Houndoom bring to mind the Grim Reaper, just as Death Eaters are wont to do. Next up, we have Aunt Marge, the dog breeder, who had a thing for vicious dogs. She chose the Pokemon Poochyena, the bite Pokemon who has a very keen sense of smell, allowing it to find and chase its prey with ease. Next up, we have the Sword of Gryffindor's namesake, Godric Gryffindor himself, who prided himself on his swordsmanship and found a Pokemon who did as well, Gallade. Gallade was courteous and a master of swordsmanship that was capable of predicting his foes' moves. Godric liked that when trying to protect someone, Gallade would move quickly and fiercely like a true Gryffindor. Next up is the most accepting of the 4 Hogwarts house founders, HELGA HUFFLEPUFF, who caught a munchlax at a young age that was attracted to her cooking skills. Due to their friendship, it eventually evolved into a Snorlax shortly after she helped found Hogwarts. The house elves would give all the leftover food to Snorlax, who wasn't a picky eater at all. Rowena boldly asked Helga to get rid of Snorlax because it seemed too dim-witted. Godric gently suggested that she might be happy with a more active Pokemon, and Slytherin told her to keep it because it perfectly exemplified her house's lack of ambition. What a jerk. However, out of loyalty, she did end up keeping Snorlax, and the students in House Elves enjoyed bouncing up and down on his large stomach, which Snorlax did not attest to. Next up, we have the founder of Ravenclaw House, Rowena Ravenclaw. Rowena's Pokemon was Slowking. Listen to Slowking's Pokédex entry. The crown on Slowpoke's head is actually a shelter who bit into Slowpoke's brain, releasing into it a venom that causes a chemical reaction that unlocks superior intelligence and extraordinary power. This headpiece / crown that gave Slowpoke superior intelligence was likely the inspiration for Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem that her daughter would later steal, thinking that she too would gain superior intelligence. While Gryffindors were known to go headfirst into a problem, Slowking, like Ravenclaw, was able to stay calm in any situation and create plans which led to effective results. Next up is the last of the Hogwarts founders, Salazar Slytherin, and his Pokemon, or as some would say, Slytherin's monster, a huge serpentine dragon. Some call it Gyarados, some call it a basilisk. Either way, this notoriously difficult to tame creature's huge fangs are deadly, and its infamously fierce temper and destructive tendencies is why it had to be kept in a wet place underground, a secret chamber, let's just call it a chamber of secrets. Tom Riddle would later find Slytherin's Gyarados and try to control it as best he could. In Hogwarts, huge pipes allowed it to travel through the castle all willy-nilly. Lastly, the whole cast of the Cursed Child, including Draco, Harry, Scorpius, Albus, and Delphi Diggory, all were only concerned with the Pokemon Celebi that gave them the ability to travel throughout time. And thanks for watching. I want to thank all of you who stuck with the extra hero to the very end.